5 o'clock. It's time for the eighth meeting of the Sherwood Planning Commission. Please call roll.
Gillum.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Middleton.
Here.
Bruno.
Here.
All received a copy of the minutes of the May 13th meeting. Any corrections or additions? Your motion?
So moved. Approve. Second.
Roll.
Gillum.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
We also have the minutes from the special meeting, April 12th. Any corrections or additions?
Move to accept. Second.
Call roll.
Gillum.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is a preliminary plat number 5 for Creekside Edition.
Yes. So in our staff report, this is one that was tabled, not tabled, but I guess it was. It's been so long since we had the special meeting. On this one, we've had several comments in terms of looking at that. You can look at the staff report. Essentially, we've got numerous contingencies with this. What our recommendation is really needing some additional information. After looking at this some more, there's kind of two options that the Planning Commission has. The Planning Commission can either require for full plans, basically the preliminary plat plus the construction plans prior to approval, or allow essentially approval of the preliminary plat with the other construction plans to be approved by the.
What's normally required?
I think typically the normal process, and I think that may be one of the reasons why there's confusion on this application, is that I think usually the construction plans have been approved after preliminary, which the majority of the comments that we have pertaining to this are really a lot of the design related pertaining.
So the preliminary plat we could vote on with contingencies and it not be signed until those contingencies are taken care of. Correct. You all have any questions?
I did receive a copy today of the set of the construction plans, and one clarification I would like to have made on the preliminary plat. It says this request is for preliminary plat approval for a 69 lot phase, and the construction drawings are for a 68 lot phase. So if we want to just correct that now, the construction plans say 68.
Okay.
So the construction plans plus that correction. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Gillum.
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye.
Bruno.
Item number 6.
A road abandonment for Briley Road. McClellan Consulting Engineers agent.
So some explanation on this. This is actually related to an application for Lisa Academy, which part of their operations are in the city of Sherwood, but they've had a site plan that's gone through the city of North Little Rock, which is immediately south of where this blue box is, where that existing manufactured mobile home park is located. One of the things that came out during that process was a discovery that this roadway lies within the city of Sherwood and not the city. And so what the applicant is wanting to do is actually abandon this right-of-way to be able to put a gate for security reasons at the end of Briley Road. In staff reviewing this, the right-of-way only serves this property that is owned by the applicant. And the property to the north does not need access to this either. So there's really logistically not a real strong reason why the city would need this right-of-way. In reviewing it, there are numerous utilities that exist within that right-of-way. So what the staff has come up with as a solution in that situation is actually converted to an easement, which would allow them to close it, but would allow maintenance of all of the various utilities. There's a bunch of utilities. But in essence, the roadway is not going to be continued. There's really not a strong public purpose other than it would cost taxpayers.
So the access to the new academy facility would be before this easement?
So essentially, yeah, if you look there, Briley Road enters, if you can see where actually, I'll come over here. It enters off the service road, comes in here, and what they're wanting to do is put a gate at that location. So really, they're the only ones that would access. So this portion would remain open. That is the city of Sherwood, and the city of North Little Rock has taken the time on that.
James, what did you say about the missing utility easements? I mean, this isn't going to impact, the abandonment doesn't necessarily impact access to those, does it?
No, but what we do recommend as a contingency is that prior to the approval of the right-of-way vacation, that an easement be created. So essentially that the right-of-way would be converted to a utility.
Preserving.
So we're really not abandoning the road, we're just changing it from a road to an easement.
Essentially.
That's right.
It would be abandoning the right-of-way, creating an easement.
Okay.
And this would be a recommendation to the city council?
Yes. That is something that requires council ordinance.
Because, Steve, that's effectively going to change the ownership of the ground. Right away is
Asking?
no, that's my opinion. So think about it in that sense too.
I'm sorry, say all that again.
Changing them from right of way to an easement changes the ownership.
Well,
This,
right.
so that's going to have to be done by ordinance,
That's
correct?
kind of what, because when you said that, that's what kind of got me thinking about how to facilitate this in the form of an ordinance.
The way that I've handled this before is essentially you have the ordinance, and that is a standalone thing that goes through. And then there's also the creation of the easement, which is a standalone thing as well, and it's kind of man-man, both of those things.
But does one have to be predicated on the other?
I would make the abandoning the right-of-way contingent upon the easement.
I would say that would be our recommendation to the council.
Agreed.
Any other questions?
I'm already in my head thinking about what drafting. I'm just thinking about we've got utility easement have to be, which we can't affect anyway. I wouldn't think that's the school owns this property, right? That's the owner, and they own to the south as well. Actually, they've acquired that land, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Trailers are.
That was part of the consideration. The abandonment of the right-of-way releases ownership. The retention of the right-of-way and allowing them to gate it and allow them to use that property for their purposes.
In terms of right of way, in my opinion, that implies
We can't gate a tax.
city maintenance, which we need to get rid of.
It would have to be abandoned. It would be more appropriate to abandon it, but then have that conversion to an easement.
That would achieve all of the functions that need to be maintained for those service providers as well as.
Which I'm in favor of, we just need to know how to accomplish it correctly.
Right, I'm just thinking that the easement's actually gonna have to come back to the city from the property owner, opposed to something that we're granting.
Is he,
See that way?
is he platting this piece of property? I mean,
You want to come up?
what's north, is
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how.
North Little Rock Planning Commission making you plat this piece of property? I mean,
Yes, we are, having a preliminary plat, final plat.
do we need to have that final plat come here as well to make sure that easement? I mean, you could,
Yes.
okay.
You please enter your name.
Yes, Ed Hankins with Bone Engineer.
Because
Write it down there.
on the plat could serve as creating the easement.
That was my thinking, now that
Mhm.
that might be, so maybe we ordinance abandons it so long as we've got some documentation to show the ordinance. Think so, Jim?
Or that it has been created.
But I don't think North Rock I don't think we can plat the property with an easement without vacating the right of way first.
I agree with you. They can't plat the city's property. Correct.
So we're in, it's one of those catch-22s.
Well, we'll have it on the agenda for this month.
Okay.
Vacation.
Okay.
Get that accomplished.
Mhm.
And that's gonna come back.
Yes. So how do you need a motion?
Just for the abandonment of the right of way.
Okay. So moved.
And staff has no problem coordinating with Sean and North
Yeah,
Rock and doing that. Because they've been very helpful.
But also, as part of the motion be with the contingent that we anticipate the showing of an easement on plat.
Agreed.
Do you understand the motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Item number 7.
A request to approve a conditional use permit for 5312 General Samuels Road, zoned R1, Kirk Wetzel, owner.
The staff comments noted that there was not a complete application submitted.
Yes, in terms of, you'll note in those comments that no site plan is included. The code requires that proposed landscaping be included, proposed screening, proposed access, location of buildings, any improvements to the property. And if any construction is intended to the property, it will be provided. So those are all things that are intended to, supposed to be included in the application. In reviewing this, I'll say that generally looking at the property, because there is no development on the west side, the south side, the north side, or the east side, there's very minimal impact on any of the property potentially. Additionally, in terms of looking at it, this is sort of an ideal location for this type of institutional use. Because it's what I would call a higher traffic local street, that it functions effectively as a collector. So this is an ideal location for this type of institutional use. And I think it would generally be appropriate for the site in the area, but we do not have the site. However, I would say staff does not anticipate posing any additional conditions on this as a general caveat. Staff would not recommend.
But without this detailed information, we don't know what those might be.
Correct.
Mr. Chairman, there is also the issue of utilities. Sherwood does not currently have water or sewer utilities available. The water is under the control of Central Arkansas Water, who will grant the extension of the line, but there's not a project to extend the line to that location at this time. And the budget estimates that I've seen are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to accomplish that. For the sewer, the city is responsible for operating and maintaining the sewer once it is created. But at this point, it is not extended to that part of Sherwood. And that is part of a long-range plan that should be reviewed in our Sherwood Vision 2040. It's part of that. There is a recent lawsuit that was finalized because Jacksonville did not exercise their option to appeal. And at that point, it was final. And the results of that are that Sherwood serves Sherwood, Jacksonville serves Jacksonville. There are other things involved here which are beyond the discussion of this meeting, but I just wanted you to be aware that there's a lot of other things that would impact producing a site plan with any other obligations on the owner's part to do certain things. They don't have enough information to actually do that. The conditional use for this purpose is the one thing that they could get, which would allow them to have it to buy the property and know that they would be able to do that. But at this point, we don't have ability to advise them on how to make a site plan that's going to be approvable by us anyway. So this is a difficult item.
So we don't really know the details of the parameters of the conditional use except generally. What conditions would we want to see if we approve this conditionally?
The site plan conform to the existing standards. Typically with the conditional use, that you're imposing standards because that use might have some kind of deleterious effect on the adjacent property, because it's sort of a dominating use in that particular area. Based upon the fact that there is no development, there essentially are no neighbors. Hard to imagine that there would be sort of a deleterious effect of this. Additionally, typically one of the things you're looking at in terms of the church use of this type is what kind of impact it's going to have on the neighbors' access and things like this. This has direct access to General Samuels, and so it's hard to say that I would not foresee imposing conditional use of it.
Just my only concern about this is the precedent it sets for approving a conditional use that we don't know what it looks like.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Gentlemen, you wish to speak to it?
Yes, sir. My name is Greg Hessel.
Come up to the podium and your name, and please sign in.
My name is Greg Heslop, and I'm a adjoining landowner, and I do have a development that's been in planning for 5 years, waiting on the utility situation, and not having any information, and I'm probably somewhat unprepared, but I would like to see what they have planned, what size church. I have a development plan there and already preliminary plat done, and we can't present it because there's no utility situation. And I guess a young lady at the city said talking about making an old house on there, an office, and I assumed an office would have to be commercial. I'd be against any commercial. And then not knowing, the city engineer indicated to me they talked about possibly a septic system, septic tank. But You know, I ain't sure I would want that, you know, with, depending on the size of the congregation. I'm not trying to make it any harder on them. I don't oppose the church thing. I would like to see what the plan is before we approve it. I hadn't got any information until I got the notice the other day in the mail and saw the signs just passing by. That's all I was.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that we have opened a public hearing, and that statement is part of the hearing. Is there anybody else who wishes to make a statement?
Yes, sir.
If you would, your name and sign in, please.
My name is Kirk Wetzel, and I'm the pastor of Church's project. And I'm a little unprepared too, except to say that I can answer some questions about the house. There was a house that was on the property that we had considered. It's there. We just thought maybe we could make it into an office or something like that. But those plans have been abandoned. We are going to demolish that house. We had a house inspector come out and look at it, and it's just too far beyond repair to do anything with. So that house will be demolished. And as far as the church building is concerned, our congregation is about 85 people. The building that we're looking at building, we don't have any hard plans yet, but we're looking at building about a 60 by 100 building, which we want to emphasize that everything will be done according to codes, landscaping, and that kind of thing. Whatever we have to do to make it work out there. It's a great place for a church, and we've established congregation. We've been in Jacksonville for over 30 years, and we just have felt that it's time to move and be just a great place for the church. I don't know if there's anything else I can answer for you.
Any commissioners have questions?
We just basically would like to get the conditional use settled so we can proceed. And we realize it's going to be a while, maybe before water gets out there and sewer gets out there. There is an existing septic system on the property for that house. There is a water hookup there, but it's Jacksonville water. I've been to the mayor of Jacksonville and talked to him about that. Not getting very far with that, but basically that's where we're at.
Richard, is connection to water going to be critical to this? Especially for
I don't know what other options there would be besides having a well, and that approval is not in my office. That's something for health department, ANRC, people like that, as well as the septic system. If it were to be used, that would be a health department issue. Being that it's 4 acres, I can see that it could be possible, especially since we don't have any utilities there to provide to them, even if it was on a short-term basis. I have no basis to make any, firm comments on that at all, except it's pretty much outside of our office. The one comment I would like to clarify with regard to the house, which is not an issue right now, but just to have the record straight, our comments about that house were that if it were a church and it were used as a church office, that would not be commercial because it would be church and it would be the conditional use in the R1 zone rather than commercial. But that's a moot point now.
Right, it's definitely going to be torn down for sure. It just needs too much investment in it to make it feasible to do.
So where we're at, we've got a proposed church, details to follow.
Until the time, and this is my opinion, until the time that he's ready to bring a site plan, the utility issues are worked out, I think this is premature. Just my opinion is just table it at this point. And bring this back at the time that we can do this and the site plan in the same meeting or very close together. This could be years in the making.
My inclination is that I think there's a general feeling that we don't have any opposition to it that I'm
No,
hearing.
no.
But we don't want to set the precedent of not knowing what we're approving.
So that's my opinion. I'm in favor of it. I just think it's way premature without a site plan.
I didn't know if we could get like a conditional, like it's
A conditional condition.
a conditional condition. Yes, sir.
Probably the best thing you can hear is nobody on it is opposed to it right now, other than for the timing aspect of it.
Okay. We had, the timing was more critical. We thought we had our other building sold in Jacksonville, and that has not panned out yet. So that's, before we can start construction, we have to get that sold.
We could go, I'm sure we could go at least part way. I'd like to see a site plan that at least tells us how big the building would be on the lot. I mean, I don't need a complete engineering drawings or anything,
Right.
but enough information to know what that impact is going to be, because obviously some neighbors do care. So we have a motion on the floor.
Motion to table.
Second.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton,
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye. Thank you.
Item number 8, 9, 10, and 11.
A request to approve a conditional use permit for 814 Bryce Street, zoned R1, that church owner. The list of parcels.
No. There are 4 parcels on this. Staff recommendation and report, please.
This is sort of a similar condition with the last. There is no site plan that was submitted. The application did not actually specifically specify what activity would be happening on the property. This is approximately 0.85 acres off of Bryce Street, composing of 4 different parcels. One of those parcels contains existing residence. Kind of looking at the context of the area, there's apartments to the west, triplex and single family that's to the north. There's single family to the east, church to the south. The applicant is that, not church. Again, in looking at the application, it's indicated for single family residential. The reason that this is being brought forward, the entirety of the rest of their land is C1, this portion of that. So similar to the other application, you need site plan, proposed landscape. I know that there's been some discussion about some of this being used as an office, some of it being used for something in the parsonage, something being used possibly for parking in some areas. And so at this point, we really don't have a lot of detail.
Gentlemen, I will just give you my opinion before we consider having a public hearing, is that the impact here is likely to be a great deal greater than on the last one, and we have no idea what they intend to do. And until we do, we really can't make any judgment, and we really can't ask people to comment on something they don't know what's happening.
Agreed.
My sense is that I would entertain a motion to postpone the public hearing to next meeting, which would be June 12th, and to table the request.
So move. I'll second.
Chair.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton,
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
Did you wish to make a statement?
I would, sir. I'm a campus pastor at that church. We do have an idea of what we're doing with the property. I'm not sure where the misinformation came from, but would like the opportunity to express that.
You can express it, but we won't take it up until next month.
Okay, our desire is, it's a residence, it's already there. There are actually 4 tracts of land that borders our current church property. 3 tracts are empty, of course, and then the tract furthest to the north, or say the northwest, would be had the house on it at 814 Bryce. At this time, we'll not do anything with the land. The house we would like to keep as a parsonage. with the secondary benefit being having small meetings, group meetings in that house is our only plan at this point.
Okay, if you get a site plan with more details about that, that would give us something to actually look at and for folks to comment on. I think there have been rumors floating around, and until we have something in hand, folks really can't respond.
Okay, so a site plan with,
I talked to staff about the details of what you need.
yes, sir, thank you.
Okay? Item number 12, you say has been withdrawn or tabled?
Table.
Old business. Any discussions about reduction of rear yard setbacks? Clear the eyes. Andy?
My name is Andy Wilson. I work for the permit department. We had a brief discussion of this idea. This idea was kind of floated as a possible solution. And this is my recollection when we were talking about maybe reducing the separation requirements for accessory structures. But
We were also considering the variance from the gentleman that had the very narrow lot that wanted to make an 8-foot addition and settled for a 6-foot addition because the rear yard setback.
and that
was-
may be, my recollection might be bad is what caused us to
I
float
think
that idea, but we discussed it and we just thought it was not a good idea to reduce the setbacks because we felt like the occasions that we're getting asked for variances, a lot of that will be, while we're talking about some of these other items as far as the accessory structures and reducing the separation requirements and giving some more flexibility there, I think that'll solve a lot of the issues as far as getting those requests anyway. What we're afraid of is if we just point blank reduce the rear yard setbacks, that the developers are just going to start developing accordingly. So what we're going to end up with is our new subdivisions are all going to have 20-foot rear yards, which is going to even promulgate more people wanting variances for make it harder to fit stuff. So that was our basic thought on it after we thought about it for a day or two and discussed it a little bit, at least in our department.
so. No change to the setback requirement at this point, but wasn't there a related issue about the separation between accessory uses and primary uses that impinged on setbacks?
Yes, there is, and that is I'm not sure where this setback issue came up. In which discussion that idea got floated?
It came from the variance requests on the corner of West Devon and Coulter.
Okay, so that's right.
That's where this started,
And
based on how to define the front versus what the back is.
That's correct. And we did, I did, just as a topic of discussion, float the idea, and we did a little slideshow here about doing the separation setback changes. And me and James has not got together and worked on that yet. But we will be coming forward at a future date.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, your concern at this point is primarily on the separation. I think I recall you saying we always use the setback requirements to dictate it anyway. About where they're locating an accessory structure.
I feel like I'm talking about two different things here, and I wanna make a distinction because this 20 foot, establishing a 20-foot rear yard setback was just kind of a separate idea that got floated, and we don't think that's a good idea.
Okay.
So,
And you're not prepared to
And on
talk
that, no,
about
we're
that
not prepared
separation?
on that
Okay.
other.
All right,
Thank you.
we'll move on to,
On the
Next one.
driveway standards revision and the PUD revisions, at the last council meeting, at my request, both of those were tabled. And they were sent back to the planning commission because, at least in the case of the driveway, there were some citizens who had questions about what was being proposed. And I believe staff got together and discussed that. And on the planned unit development, several council members had a number of questions. Going on the driveway standards revision, I guess I'll just give you an overview of where I'm standing on that. I cannot, for the life of me, get in front of the city council and defend whether it should be 100 feet or 200 feet or 3 miles. I mean, I don't know what kind of standard would make sense that would be relevant to every property. On my morning walks, I go by a property that has a paved driveway all the way up to the garage and a low maintenance yard, gravel, all the way to the curb. And I'm asking myself, if we regulate driveways, why don't we regulate yards so they don't do that? And then we get into the whole discussion about, well, what about parking pads that lead to the curb? Is that a driveway or is it something else? And it just starts swarming on you. And it seems to me that the issue is that the city has an obligation to protect public safety from the right of way to the street. I mean, to my mind, there's no question about that. Past that, I don't know what the standard is, except that the public safety purpose in my mind is to prevent gravel from draining into the roadway and creating a safety hazard. Maybe to somewhat a little bit less, dust being raised. But again, in my mind, what makes a difference about that is the slope of the property relative to the street. If the property is uphill from the street, no matter how far you get it up, there's going to be some drainage problems that need to be taken care of. The property is below grade from the street. Gravity takes care of it. We don't worry about the public purpose on the street. Maybe we do with the property owner. But I don't see how some distance is going to be uniformly applicable. That's just my concern. And the final analysis, what I'm looking for, at least in my position, is that I want to be able to defend the public purpose for the ordinance that we're recommending be passed. And I'm just not quite there yet. There, that's it.
I got a few comments. In reading this proposal here, revisions, section 1, Sherwood shall be amended as follows: driveways. Paragraph B, paving requirements. Paragraph 1, residential paving requirements. Subparagraph B, paving shall be required for all driveways that provide permanent continuous access to residential structures or required paving area located in residence zone. Paving shall not be required for those portions of a driveway for a single dwelling greater than 100 feet from the edge of the street. I like that. That's what we've been arguing over for months. And this paragraph 1B here clearly states you got to pave the first 100 feet. And after that, you don't have to pave anymore.
Why not the first 75 feet?
Because I like 100 feet.
Richard.
Mr. Middleton and I did have some discussions regarding the containment of loose materials. In other words, if someone gravels out to the edge of the pavement and it's not a driveway, then it's not a driveway. But if it was a driveway, it would have to be paved. We have another ordinance in place, the stormwater ordinance, that covers illicit materials or sediment or anything else that is not contained in the yard. So if something is eroding into the roadway, we have an ordinance to address that, which means we have to stabilize it to some point to where it can't get there. So that in itself, as far as, gravel being there, if the gravel's moving into the road, then we can address that. If the gravel's not moving into the road because it goes down, then we don't have anything to say they can't have gravel on the yard. But at least it's not creating the public hazard of having materials on the roadway that can cause someone to lose control of the vehicle or any other reason for not having those illicit materials on the pavement. So, I mean, as far as the, stabilizing things, that's one thing. As far as throwing one number against it, as long as the right of way, which is the city's property, is paved, then there are many other considerations, such as the flavor of the development, reasons that developers would want to do different things. But for consistency in the neighborhoods where the house is, the 25-foot building line applies and the house is right up there close. Well, 25 feet's not that far, and the first 11 more or less is going to be right away. So there's not a whole lot of additional paving to be done in the paving of those driveways for consistency and beauty and, other reasons. Makes a lot of sense. The 100 foot, it's as good a number as any number.
It sounds like you just said that if the gravel doesn't go into the street, he doesn't have to pave it at all.
Well, if the gravel doesn't, if the gravel doesn't go into the street, he wouldn't have to pave the yard. That's what I'm saying. He has to stabilize materials so they don't get into the street. And if it's a yard material, no matter what it is, if it's gravel, if it's dirt, whatever, it can't get in the street.
Is that ordinance after the fact?
We have building and grading permits that are issued that require materials be placed to prevent off-site tracking. And there is state law as of 2003, which is the NPDES Phase 2, when it came in, that regulates under general permit that certain things cannot be discharged into storm drains, and your curbs and gutters are part of your storm drain system. So someone allowing materials to get out of their yard into the curb and gutter to wash down the storm drain is already regulated, so we can already address that. Just staying with a driveway, just the simple definition of a driveway, vehicular use from the road to the house, the city is certainly concerned with the part that's in the city's right of way. And we would want that to be paved because we got an asphalt street, we've got curbs and gutters. We would want anything in the streets in the city's right of way to be permanent. But beyond that, it's where I can see there could be some options. But, when it's a short distance, I don't know what you would do if you had an option, is what I'm saying. So when you say if it's 25 feet, if it's 50 feet, if it's 100 feet, if it's 300 feet, at some point it becomes a cost issue. And I think that's really where we are on this, more than an aesthetic issue of someone wanting the dirt driveway or wanting the gravel driveway as opposed to not wanting concrete or not wanting pavement. And once we're beyond 100 feet, if that's far enough to suit the city, then it's 100 feet.
Great, 100 feet. This whole thing started when we had some people that had a house that was 300 feet from the street, and he didn't want to pave it all the way to the house. So what we were doing, and we did it a lot, we did a variance. And we said, okay, we're going to give you a variance where you only have to pave the first 25 or 50 feet, but you don't have to pave 250 feet more up to your house. Gravel never came into the conversation ever. So, and then people pointed out that what we were doing was not a variance, that it was really illegal to say, okay, you don't have to pave the next 200 feet. That's not a variance. So we came up with this regulation, which has been debated for maybe a year. And to me, I think we finally got it right here. I like this.
What was the revision that we have now over what was submitted to the council?
I think the change of the question, honestly, my memory is a little bit foggy. One thing I will say, pertaining to the argument of 100, I think it goes back to the same question as to why side setbacks are 10, why is a setback 25 feet, why is a rear setback 25 feet? And at some point you set a number, and that's happens to be what the standard is. And I would beg anyone to argue why you have a 25-foot setback as opposed to 23 and a half. But what the difference is. I think in terms of the logic of looking at 100 feet, what we were looking at is sort of the context of the area in which it was located, that once you get beyond 100 feet, it is inherently a more rural context. And so within those areas, it is largely on a basis of aesthetics that the rural context you expect to have more use of gravel and things like that. Because honestly, in that situation, paving to the end of the earth is neither effective or doesn't achieve a goal that the city wants. It just ends up in having more paving, so you've got more runoff and money associated with that. It doesn't achieve an aim to the property owner, because the property owner, they're having to pay large additional expense for something that really doesn't have a great deal of benefit for them. So there's not a great deal of purpose in having it beyond that 100 foot.
What did that lady came up after the last meeting? What was her concern?
She was just confused by some of the language, and we made just a few minor revisions to the language. And then we also, and I'm at a loss not having this in front of me. I wasn't prepared to speak on this tonight, but I believe we did retract the definition that was existing in the current zoning book. For driveways.
Sir, I don't think there was a definition.
I accidentally copied the wrong version of it when I came. The revisions pertain to paving shall be required that provide permanent, non-intermittent access. We changed that to primary, permanent, continuous access to a residential structure. So that deals with the primary driveway that is intended to be the permanent access to the structure. So some of the concerns that were raised pertain to, let's say that it is an undeveloped lot and they just have a driveway. We're not requiring that actually be paved because it doesn't connect to the structure. So in this instance, it's something that's connected to the structure on the lot that has permanent access. We additionally access to we struck parking area or property. Essentially had it to where it's residential structure or required parking area located in the residential zone. And then we added further down, where paving is not otherwise required, driveway shall provide a paved area. So I remember in our discussions, she had raised some very good questions. These changes that we made were done in an effort to address those questions.
Refresh my memory. Why was the definition of driveway dropped? Because that's not in the current code. And it was proposed to be added.
We have a definition in the definition section of the zoning book for driveways right now, and it essentially uses the same language that's in the ordinance that we're trying to amend.
That was the one that basically the definition included the standards for construction.
It's all the wording that's in the ordinance that's in back of the zoning book, which,
Are we in effect going to have two definitions then?
well, we're going to do away with one of them, was my understanding, the one that's in there now, and we're going to add the new definition.
The ordinance that we considered about 2 or 3 months ago, particularly in this paragraph B1B, was confusing to me. I was ready to pass it, but I'd read the thing and I'm saying, wait a minute, what exactly does this mean? And it was one of those deals was, it says 100 feet, but I'm not sure that's what he means.
That was a section that would confuse that citizen.
It's clear now. It's 100 feet.
Just a little clearer. And I'm not looking, I don't have a copy of what y'all are looking at. Did we retract the definition that was in the zoning book?
I actually don't think that we did, because it was just coming back for discussion.
What was in the zoning book, the definition, included in the definition section was the standards of construction. That was what the definition was. And what we were proposing in the ordinance, or the draft that went to the council, added a new definition to take the place of that one. It probably didn't accurately delete the other one. My concern at this point is if we deleted the one we proposed, and now we've got two that are saying the same thing in separate parts of the code. That's duplication and confusion. We don't need that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
I'd like to get back to what the proposed definition was. And I don't have it in front of me.
I didn't realize that we sent anything to the council.
We did. We voted to send it. What, in March?
As I hate to say it, I think we just need to come back next month and be prepared to get this thing done. I do want to speak to the planning commission about the 100 feet. That's not a number that was pulled out of thin air. That is a logical number, because most of our city lots where we're building subdivisions, they're running 140 foot, give or take, deep. You've got a 60 or 70 foot wide deep house and a rear yard setback. And the idea, we always want pavement for the required driveways for all our houses that are located in subdivisions. Okay, but once we get into very deep lots or acreages and things like that, we want the property owners to have the ability to enjoy, non-paved surfaces in addition to the required paved surfaces at the front of their property.
My only concern is 100, 101, 50. And yeah, that's probably fairly logical. I like that a heck of a lot better than I like 200.
If we get 50 and we had a 140 foot lot, there's a possibility they could build a house. 100 always covers our neighborhoods, our standard building lots.
Yeah.
With very few exceptions. Even if they're doing a side loading or a side loading garage at the back of the house where the driveway is pretty much the full depth of the lot, after you remove the rear yard setback and things like that, you're just always going to have a paved driveway.
Mostly because that's what home buyers want, not what we require.
Well, I'm just trying to say that's not a number that's just pulled out of thin air.
It's a compromise.
We gotta have a number, and you gotta have some way to define it. It might as well be that. At least it's got some logic to it.
Yeah. Okay. His logic is very good. I understand that. I mean, boy, there's some weird people. Somebody built a house, they'd have 10 foot of gravel there. There's nutcases all over.
I'm not touching that.
Well, I mean, I understand your position of being able to, needing to go before the city council with something that has, you know, some reason behind it. And I'm just trying to provide it. I mean, it's not like we just decided to start regulating driveways. We had an ordinance that we've been using for years to regulate driveways. It's just we had a system of things at the city of Sherwood where it was acceptable. It was like you could expect it if you had a rural setting to be able to get a waiver or variance for having to do that paved driveway. And that's changed now. And I think it's a good change, but we're just trying to address that without getting way off into the, you know, trying to do a new zoning classifications like rural estate, stuff like that, which we discussed, and hopefully we'll get there later. But right now, we still have a need for people that have acreage not to have to pave everything,
Agreed.
You know, on their property.
Agreed.
Yeah,
That's all we're trying to do.
there are some $400,000 houses out north in Sherwood, which we gave them a variance, and they probably have 200 foot of gravel leading up to their driveway, right?
Well, my sense of it is that what you have drafted so far is probably pretty acceptable to the majority of this group, but you need to take care of the definition issue with a definition that doesn't include standards, which are part of this section, and bring it to the council or to the commission next
Right, and I
month.
want to make sure that we're voting on what we want. I want to make sure we're just clear. So let's come back one more time, and we'll be sure and get together, and we'll have it together better. I apologize. I didn't realize we didn't.
Well, my personal feeling is I really don't want to rush things. I want us to think these things through and make sure it's the best we can send to the council. And I think we're getting there.
Okay, thank you.
On the planned unit development, again, my sense is we're not ready to take this back to the council, partly because I think you need to see the questions that the council sent. We really haven't heard anything from any citizens or developers or anything, but we have heard from council, and that's kind of important. And so we need, James, what we really need you to do is we can send a copy of those comments that we got and respond to them, what you think. And let's talk about it next meeting.
I do want to get a sense that we do continue want to work on this.
Yes. Yeah. It's, for me personally, it's not a high priority, and I'll tell you why. We're about ready to do the Vision Sherwood. And Vision Sherwood, in my mind, hopefully will make some recommendations to us about what land use ought to look like, what regulatory reforms might be appropriate. And I think that should drive any suggestions we might want to make about changes in the zoning code, changes in subdivision regulations, and whether we tailor flexibility in planned unit developments differently than we've been doing. And so I kind of would like to hold off on making many substantive changes to the zoning code until we've had the planning process take place.
I'll say one benefit, this is just inserting my comment on that, with PUD, it actually, as the plan changes, it helps inform the way that you would actually approve. And so I think these reforms are probably necessary, regardless of what changes with the plan. But I think those things with the plan, as it does change, will ultimately inform, because the way that the PUD regulations are set up, the underlying sort of the recommendations of the comprehensive plan are intended to be sort of included within.
What I would request is that when James sends us the questions that we've received and his comments on them, study the draft, study the questions, and let's talk about it at the next meeting. I think we all want to be real comfortable that we really believe what we're sending the council. Two new things I'd like to bring up. One, as I've talked on and off about the zoning map, what MetroPlan has done is created a slightly different zoning map than the one we've been operating with for years. That's basically, it covers the city completely, but you might have a zoning classification that's 200 feet off the right of way, which means it's cutting through all kinds of properties. You got many properties in the city, quite frankly, and because it was an old map, the lines are blurred. They may or may not make very much sense to what the properties are. And in the final analysis, zoning is about properties. And so what MetroPlan has done is created a parcel-based zoning map. There are still going to be some places as a result of what this planning commission has done in the past, where we've got multiple zoning classifications on a single parcel of land or multiple parcels of land. But what MetroPlan has done is say, okay, the closest we can approximate what the classification for this property is based on what we see on the original map. And what I think we ought to do, quite frankly, is put a draft of that map out and put it on the website. Everybody have a copy and put it out there for public comment for the next 2 or 3 months, including staff comments, because we have found some errors in the map that we've got already. And I think we ought to go to the parcel-based, which will be a whole lot more logical and consistent. But I don't want to do it until we've established that it's accurate and reflects what we're doing. I don't want to change the zoning. All I want to do is get us to a clean, clear base zero. At some point in the future, then we may want to make some rezonings, and we'll be hearing them. But I'd like to get a clean map before we do that. And I'd like a sense of the commission that we're ready to put that out there for public review. And kind of the same thing with the zoning code. As you know, your zoning book is missing a lot of details. It hadn't been updated consistently. MetroPlan updated it, and what I sent to everybody was a current copy of the zoning requirements of the city of Sherwood. But what we have been doing in the past is we've been amending the original zoning ordinance, or amendments to the original zoning ordinance, or amendments to the amendments of the original zoning ordinance, to the point where a lot of the amendments, we weren't really sure where they fit. And what we need to get to, and I've talked with our city attorney at length about this, is a zoning code. So anytime we are making a revision to the zoning text, we are revising the code. And that code, and then we know exactly what we're changing instead of trying to figure out where does it go. And it will be part of the municipal code, but we will be amending the code and not an ordinance. And I think we're about ready. The staff has looked at the draft that MetroPlan sent us and don't find anything that we've left out and we haven't added. At this point, I don't want to change the zoning. What I want to get is to ground zero, where this is current, this is the organization, and what I'd hope the council would do is adopt it, say, this is what it is now go forth and do good. It's another thing that I would like to put up on the city's website to start getting citizen comment and review, and for us to maybe take up in a month or two.
Perfect. Yeah.
Any other business? Oh yeah. One of the things planning commissions are supposed to do is plan. And we got the community workshop coming up next Tuesday evening at 6:30. You all are going to be there, right? Yep. And so y'all, it's real important that we get some citizen involvement here. These workshops or charrettes have been very useful in getting people out to think about what the community should look like. And when we start getting ideas from people, that gives us some more comfort level that when we undertake planning and policies, that we're doing something that's consistent with what the community wants. So talk to your friends and neighbors, get them to come out. The better turnout, the better cross-section of the city we get, the better it will be.
And I do have a picture that I will send all of you to share on Facebook, MySpace, Pinterest, Instagram, Snapchat.
That's all.
And all, yeah. One thing I would say is that times where I have conducted these types of workshops, we've gotten very positive response in terms of numbers of people. Because planning commissioners, council members, staff, name it, chamber directors, everybody reached out and talked to people, asking them to come to having some sort of face-to-face contact, face-to-face conversation results in people actually having a great success. So that's I mean, you agree, right?
Yes, absolutely. Or any other business? We have a motion to adjourn the planning commission.
So moved. Second.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Time to open the Board of Adjustment. Please take the roll call.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Here.
Middleton,
Here.
Bruno,
Here.
First item is the approval of the March 13th meeting minutes. March 13th.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton,
Aye.
Bruno,
Aye.
Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial entity, and as such, all testimony is sworn testimony, and decisions made by this board are final and can only be challenged through a court of law. Will city engineer and city planner, do you swear to tell the truth in any statement you make?
I do.
The only item on here is a variance request, and before we go any further, I think we have to do two things. One is to establish whether this is in fact a variance, and secondly, if we can conclude that it's not a variance, then we'll be ruling on the exception or height, materials, and location. But according to staff, you're telling us that it is your opinion that this is not a variance.
The code states in section 942, any fences or screens constructed must not extend beyond the front building line on any lot, nor beyond the side building line on the corner lot. Said fences or screens shall have Board of Adjustments approval as to location, height, material, and construction.
City Attorney, would you concur with that? And board, I think we should take a motion to establish that it is not a variance, and we will take it up as a special exception.
So moved. Second.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin,
Aye.
Middleton,
Aye.
Bruno,
So we are now going to rule on height, materials, location.
And, you know, reasoning, the board can consider this variance. I think our recommendation. This is an extremely odd lot. I don't think you ever get a situation where an individual has front yard on three sides. Can't think of the time I've ever seen it. It's fairly bizarre. So in this instance, as you can see there, in this location, the property owner is wanting to construct a fence in this location back here. And due to that being the part of the front yard, which actually effectively base it on the location of the structure, effectively would be that individual's rear yard, really don't have a situation where they have adequate fencing on their rear yard, but normally as most would. So staff's recommendation, well, in terms of looking at the fence would approach approximately 15 feet side setback from approximately 90 feet. In terms of looking at that, our recommendation is the fenced area must be built as per the proposed plan submitted by the applicant. The fence can encroach into the right of way at any point. The applicant should submit the height of fencing desired and materials of construction for adjustment consideration. The board is in agreement with materials and heights. So that's probably a question for the applicant is what the actual height.
Your testimony will be under oath if you would give your name.
Betty Reeves.
And do you swear to tell the truth in the statement you're about to make?
Yes, sir. Okay, is that good?
Yeah.
Well, I'm asking for it, and I heard the young man say it's a very odd or different lot. I truthfully was not aware of that when it was just a vacant lot, and I really wasn't. I hadn't heard that I had 3 front yards until just now. The way the house faces, the front of the house, in my definition, faces Gap Garden Way Drive. My driveway enters from Garden Way Drive at the side of the house, and the backyard to me is next to the cul-de-sac. And I never considered it being more than 1 front yard. I guess I was never even told that before. I wasn't really clear when I even bought the property before. It took a year and a half for me to even decide on a plan. So I'm asking only because if I have to go with the variance from the curb of the cul-de-sac, the back of the curb, into what I define the back of the yard or a fence, then I'm practically going to have what I would call a dog run, because it's going to be like 8 feet. It's going to look like I don't have it up there, but around the cul-de-sac curve, it's going to go in. If it goes in 15 feet, then all that's just going to be, which is sod, which I'm taking care of, and all sprinkler and everything. Then my fence, and then the next door neighbor's backyard fence, and between her fence and mine would only be about 8 or 10 feet. I haven't really measured it out, but I did put flags out and curved them like the fence would be, hopefully. I was told that by another Sherwood entity that I cannot curve that fence. And that's another matter. I don't understand why, because I've read the CCRs till I probably know them better than anybody now. And it doesn't say a thing about not curving a fence. And there is some in my neighborhood, a few houses away, that is curved. So I really don't understand that, sir. But that's why I'm asking for a variance, is because I think probably the only, how I did it, I don't know, picked out the only odd shaped lot in Gap Creek.
Maybe in Sherwood.
in Sherwood too. I liked it because it was on the end of the street. There's no one that can build at what I call the dead end of the cul-de-sac when you come around the curve. That's going to stay wooded. And then they've already started a house on the lot next to that. So no one is going to be right next to that on any way, but you can see the yard when you come around the cul-de-sac.
For all practical purposes, you have a corner lot that's not a corner lot.
Yes, sir.
I think the question facing us right now is, would this board agree that the fence should be placed on the property line as she's showing it? And what should the height be and what should the materials be?
I think the materials are
Which are? Okay.
The 6-foot wood. Sorry. What is their covenants over there? 6-foot wood?
I think it is. I don't know that they differentiated in the art. I know all the
All of it in, with the exception of the other stages, which I don't understand in Gat Creek. I still don't understand that, but I don't understand a lot.
I'm Andy Wilson. I work for the permit department, and I told Ms. Reeves I would help her if she needed any assistance at this meeting, and I've been kind of involved in this thing for several months. But what I'd like for Ms. Reeves to do is tell y'all what she has proposed, what kind of fence you're going to build, what kind of fence you planning on building.
Okay. A 6-foot and cedar material, not pine. Going with cedar because it should last longer. What else would you?
I hate to read it again, but I've kind of got knowledge since I live out there. They have specific architectural guidelines. Property pretty strict about it. So anything that you needs to be
And
part of your approval if you want to grant them, it needs to be follows the standards set by the property. She'll get in trouble then.
I have
Those
spoken
standards have
to
been
the-
approved before by the city. So those standards have been approved in previous lots by the city.
It's probably spelled out in the bill of assurance for each phase of that subdivision. So,
I'm trying to
Yeah.
say version 3.
yes.
They'll come back.
Right.
Now,
I'm sorry I don't have the gentleman's name, but he did contact me, who's the Property Owners Association president. And there's a long history here, but there was an iron fence put up all the way pretty close to behind the curb before, and the Property Owners Association forced Miss Reeves to remove the fence, and it was established without a permit. Okay, and at some point, my name got floated, I guess, because I met her and the fence company over there the second or third time around. And anyways, I did not write the guy's name down, but he was the Property Owners Association making inquiry as to the location of her flags. Is that where she's going to put the fence? A 6-foot privacy, wood privacy fence, to my knowledge, is accepted in all our neighborhoods. I mean, this is a real standard type fence. So I think you can move forward with the comfort that this is not going to violate any kind of properties association agreement as far as the materials.
Are you familiar with why it might not be allowed to be curved?
it seems to me if the fence is put on the property line, it will be curved, period.
Yeah.
It's going to follow the curvature of the cul-de-sac.
I think that's just some confusion that came about in all the discussion. Now, the other fence was put behind the curb, and maybe somebody got the words language mixed up, but I don't think that's not going to be an issue.
Sounds to me what I'm hearing then is a 6-foot cedar fence on the property line. Is that right?
Following the contour of the property line, which is it's a 15-foot. They have a 15-foot front yard setback in that neighborhood, And what you said is true. If this was a corner lot, we would have already done an in-house approval based on the latitude that the zoning ordinance gives the city engineer. And I'm involved in those, so I'm always going to him and discussing if there's going to be a site distance problem. But I don't see a problem with this fence. And I don't think the property owners association, they're satisfied. He indicated to me he was satisfied with the setback now. Whereas they didn't like it when it was 2 foot behind the curb. Once it was out in the right of way, we
Right.
can't have that.
Right.
So that's
Okay.
been remedied.
So,
Can I have a motion?
here it goes. You got a motion to approve your special exception with a 6-foot wood fence that meets Gap Creek Properties Owners Association's bill of assurance. And it has to be outside the city's right of way.
Second.
Gillum,
Aye.
Martin.
Aye.
Middleton.
Aye.
Bruno.
Aye.
A motion to,
I did want to take a quick moment and introduce our other client, Juliet Ritchie. She's out of our phase office, so you may hear from her from time to time. She helps with different things and corrects me when I'm wrong.
you've got your hands full.
Nice to meet you. Motion to adjourn.